Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the CGL Q&A with business leaders. Obviously, tonight we are focusing on the entrepreneurs and high tech. We have a wonderful panel with a great moderator, which I will introduce you to shortly. So again, we organize under the circumstances as we just said, we're focusing on the virtual opportunities to broaden the audience and to engage many speakers from around the world. We have Q&A with business leaders covering various arenas. I'll tell you more about some other things we're doing towards the end of the evening. But again, thank you very much for joining us tonight. We are very excited about our panel and about all of you joining us here. We are sure you will be enlightened, you will be entertained, you will be inspired. On that note, without further ado, I'd like to introduce you to our moderator tonight, Gideon Valkin, who will also tell you a little about himself because he can probably do that better than I can. So thank you very much and have a wonderful evening. Gideon.
Hi, everyone. Good evening, good afternoon, good, I don't know if for anyone it's good morning. Welcome to a really amazing panel for an amazing organization, the CJL. So the title for tonight is 360 Degrees on the High Growth Startup. I think the objective is basically that, to have a carefully selected panel of great kind of tech leaders from different perspectives. We've got Gilad, who has operational experience, but is an investor and works at a leading European fund called Target Global. I'm going to let everyone introduce themselves a bit more in a minute. We have Justin Landsberger, who's been an operator and was an early employee at Deliveroo. And probably the bravest of us all, we have our founder in the house, Gabriela Hersham, who's the CEO and co-founder of Huckletree. I'll let them introduce themselves in a minute. A little bit about me. I'm Gideon Valkin. I am currently an EIR at Entree Capital. Most recently, I was a kind of commercial and special projects director at Monzo, the digital bank based in the UK. I've been in the fintech space for about 7 years. I've been a co-founder and I've worked at a company called ClearScore before Monzo, and before that was an investment banker for 5 to 6 years. Delighted to be here. Delighted to have everyone on. I'm going to let the panel introduce themselves briefly, and then we'll dive into the conversation. Gilad, why don't we start with you?
Yeah, sure, and thank you for inviting me. So very Israeli background standard. Probably you can hear from my bad accent. You cannot hide it as Israeli. It stays with you for life. So for Army, was an officer, then joined the first company, was M-System. It was acquired by SanDisk for $1.6 billion. The company invented the USB memory key. I was in a business position. Then I led the business side in Anobit. We did the chip in every iPhone. We sold the company to Apple. It became Apple R&D Center in Israel, quite big and successful R&D center. And actually our chip is in every iPhone by Apple. Then I joined Elastifile, led the business there. We did the file system. We sold it to Google. It became a Google file system. I started to invest many companies in cyber, had some luck, some of them were acquired. Joined Target Global 3.5 years ago. Actually, mainly to turn around one investment that a few months ago was announced that it went to Facebook after a fierce fight between Apple and Facebook about the company.
Thanks, Gilad. Gabriela, why don't you go next?
Cool. Hi, everyone. I just want to also jump in by saying that, as the guys know from backstage, I've come into this totally blind and on my phone, which is suboptimal. I have no idea who's here. I can only see the person that's speaking. So I hope that this will be relatively hiccup free. I also have 2 children that might appear at any moment in the background, but we'll do our best. So hi, a little bit about myself. My name is Gabby. I am the founder of Huckletree, the workspace accelerator company. We have hubs across London, Dublin, and Manchester, and very focused on supporting the tech and innovation ecosystem. All of our members that work from our workspaces work within the innovation ecosystem. So we have startups, scale-ups, corporate innovation teams, venture capital funds, ecosystem service providers, and everyone in between. We theme our hubs by industry or by groups of industry. We are very interested in building engaging communities, and we also run educational programming such as accelerator programs, programs for future founders, etc., and are trying to do our best job to support the ecosystem in matters that we really believe need to change and need to shift, such as helping bring more diversity to the greater tech ecosystem. Personally, I am a mother, as I said, to 2 young children. Before Huckletree, I was working in the film industry, and that's leads me on to where I am now.
Sorry, I was on mute. Justin, why don't you go next?
Yeah, Joseph, again, thank you for having me on the panel. Like Gilad, I'm not from the UK. I'm originally from New York, another accent which is difficult to mask. I joined Deliveroo 7 years ago. It was my 7th year anniversary a couple of weeks ago, which made me the first employee there. So I joined in 2013, and I was initially brought in as a head of sales. So I launched, I developed, and I scaled our initial sales team, sales infrastructures in London. I then led the team that expanded our business from London into the rest of the UK. I then did some of our initial international expansion. I then moved to Hong Kong, where I launched and ran that business as a general manager for a year. I moved back into the UK in 2016 into the commercial director role, which I did for 3 years. And then most recently, I've moved into a global sales role where I lead our enterprise business development teams. For Deliveroo, for those that don't know, is an on-demand food delivery business. We launched when I joined in 2013. We've scaled to 11 countries since then. Before working at Deliveroo, I worked in real estate for 5 years, and super excited to be on the panel today.
Thanks everyone. So yeah, as you can tell, we have a pretty impressive panel. Let's get going. So I'd love to give everyone a flavor of kind of the experience that that we go through on the inside when in the early stages of growth. It's obviously a wild ride. I think many who have dialed in have probably read stories. Justin, I know Deliveroo has a very strong culture. You're a social bunch. You know how to have a good time. I'd love to kind of get a sense from you, hear about something unique in the culture of the organization that has influenced your experience there, and maybe bring it to life with a story.
Yes, strong culture. We definitely like to, we certainly used to like to have fun. I think one of the reasons, so we have a strong culture, as you said, and I think one of the reasons why we've both kept that, or had it in the first place and then maintained it over the 7 or 8 years that we've been trading for, is because fortunately, we're still a founder-led business. And I think when you have a founder-led business, and then you have a founder that's as passionate, that's culturally driven, culturally minded as our CEO and founder Will is, I'm sure Gabriela is the same, is you just build this amazing culture from day one, and then you sort of grow it and maintain it and keep it over the life cycle of your business. I think, having spent the majority of my career at one business, I don't want to say as founders leave and as, businesses and teams change, the culture goes or the culture changes. But all I can, from my experience, Will set the culture from day one. It was work hard, it was play hard, it was grow at all costs, it was make things happen. And, even as you receive, venture capital and private equity money, I think the desire to win, the desire to be number one, the desire to do all that while still having fun has and I think will continue as long as Will is in the business. I think trying to put that to life, when people, I'm taking an assumptive position that people know what Deliveroo is, and in the Q&A, please ask if you don't, but I think everyone associates us with a very high growth business, TV advertising, bus advertising, spending money and growing that way. But the beginning was very, very different. And Will, and our founder, is, he doesn't like to spend money that he doesn't need to spend. And so in our first couple of years, I think I guess my point is people maybe assume that a lot of the growth is what I would call sort of sexy growth, out of home advertising, big campaigns, big sponsorships. But Will and I used to not break into buildings, but we would get access to big flat buildings, and we would walk around and we would flyer, and we would leave flyers to people's mailboxes. We would leave hotel sort of do not disturb things on people's doors and boxes. We got kicked out of numerous buildings. And I think for me, that was a big culture shock, because when I joined this company, and I didn't think that I would be, having to do stuff like that. But I think it was a testament to, we're going to do everything that is to be successful, to grow, and to make things happen. And if that means we're going to sneak into someone's residential flat building, we were going to do that. And that sort of, we don't still do that because it's against the law. But that culture and that will to win and make things happen and get things done, has not changed in 7 years.
That's awesome. I guess hence the saying, sometimes you've got to break a few eggs, right? So Gabriela, as a founder yourself, how does this resonate with you? I mean, can you maybe bring to life something from Huckletree around culture, or a story from the early days?
Sure. I mean, I think my general viewpoint on this, and everything that Justin's saying really resonates with me. I think that over time, I have always over-indexed myself as a founder, Andrew, my co-founder, and all of our kind of senior leadership team. One of the things that we have kind of spent most time on and really tried to optimize for was to build a really strong and strong culture, a very flat culture, and a very supportive culture. And I've always been really proud of that as the founder of the business. And whenever anybody says to me, what is one of the things that you're most proud about with Huckletree, the team and the people behind it are always the thing that I say. But I think now, we've all been through such a shift over the past sort of 9 months. And I think what I'm realizing is that culture is never a fixed state. Like, culture is never something that you get there and you've achieved it and you can say, okay, done, check the box, we can now move on. It's always in constant evolution. And I think that evolution is determined by various, both macro and micro factors. And I think that the last 9 months, I know how much that's affected our culture as a business. And I think it will probably have affected the culture of every single business around the world in some way. I think that we have done a really good job, as I was saying, of building that supportive and open culture, and that family style approach to building a business really served us in our early years, and really would have been something that if you would have asked me this question 12 months ago, I would be saying, there you go, all the background noises that could be happening are happening, the dog, the doorbell. But I don't actually think that culture is going to be the culture that is going to see us through this next stage of our growth. And that's what I find is quite interesting, is that now, looking forward, I think that we need a culture that is perhaps slightly more hierarchical than I had ever intended it to be, and a culture that will bring us a fresh dynamic with support for our team members, but with the right support, and more reflective of where we are. So I perhaps didn't give you the answer that you were hoping for, but it's a kind of evolution in my mindset as to what culture means, and how it changes throughout a business's journey.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense, and I think speaks to the changing and at times counterintuitive needs of high growth. And I think this is actually a perfect segue into kind of moving a bit more into into the business itself, I'm keen to give people a sense of, there's a lot of literature out there about startups and scale ups and the types of business insights that you need, that you kind of develop and acquire through the course of the journey. And I think, in many cases, these things can seem counterintuitive at the time, and could certainly have seemed counterintuitive to our kind of our grandparents and great grandparents. So Gilad, I'd love to hear from you about, you see a lot of startups, you've got a pretty broad portfolio, and you've seen a lot of growth kind of within that. I'd love to hear from you a little bit about, some key learnings that you've had working with early stage and high growth companies that might have seemed counterintuitive at the time.
Yeah, maybe I will speak about lessons from what I spent most of my life, which is from the startup side, not from the investor side. And I will give maybe three things that I learned from people I used to work for, and I had a lot of luck learning from truly top entrepreneurs in Israel. The first thing is I worked for a crazy professor in Israel. He sold over 20 companies. He's a billionaire. He's most well recognized in the world in signal processing. When you study signal processing, you actually study his findings. And he used to teach at the university in Tel Aviv. He donated the buildings, but he used still to teach every Monday. And he gave the same class 25 years. And he's number one in the world in processing. He used to come to the office Sunday morning to the office. He used to call me, say, Gilad, come to my office. I came, he says, are there any crises? And I said, no, everything is okay. Of course not. Everything wasn't okay, but I told him everything was okay. He said, okay, go out. He was went to the door, locked it. He used to leave the office 10 p.m. with notes, came to me and says, Gilad, whatever I taught till today was very stupid. I don't know how students came to my classes. This is how my class in signal processing should look like. And the same, let's say, perfection on every email that you used to send. Let's say you are getting email from Apple or Facebook or Google. He used to sit on email of 5 sentences, 3 hours. And the guy has much higher IQ than I am. But he was such an expert in positioning and knowing how every word from the other side will be read, which was quite lesson for me for life. So this was first thing. The second thing I will also, and this Rabbi Vogel heard from me, one day he came to me and he said that there is an engineer that you heard is very good. How can we bring him? The guy was a Russian engineer, very, very smart, but very hard to speak with him. I knew him from the previous company I used to work for. And I told him that the only way to bring this guy, because Russian engineer then didn't believe in options and startup, they thought it's all fake in Israel. They wanted to work in big companies. So I told him, listen, but they very respect someone like you. You are a PhD in signal processing. You made billions of dollars in tech. You will cook for him. And we brought the guy to this professor flat roof apartment in Tel Aviv. And the guy is very neurotic, this professor. He called me 10 times what to cook. And when we came, he cooked for him and everything. And then we started drinking competition against the Russian guy. With the idea is that if he loses, he comes to work for us. I woke up in the morning, I have no idea where I was and how I arrived home. I woke up like noon, and there was text message in my phone. It was then before smartphone. The Russian guy said, I put you in a taxi, but you won. I'm coming to work for you. And this also a lesson that you need to be very greedy on people. If you see someone very good, and this guy, again, I worked for a billionaire, sold over 20 companies. He couldn't go to sleep knowing that there's someone that will add value into the company and will not work for him. And he did all he could in order to bring this guy, more than he would have done. Then we signed deals with Apple and other companies to bring Apple to the table. But to bring this talent for him was like a major thing that like nothing will lead him to failure. So one is when you speak with the other side, and this I speak against mainly us Israelis, we tend to write emails very fast and, say our opinion very fast. Usually time is against you, which means don't be very fast, take the day, and then write a very, very careful, well-thought email. And the second thing is bring the best talent you can bring to your company. And this is like, spend on that 2 days a week. Is if you are the CEO, how to bring the best people to the company.
That's great. Thanks, Gilad. I've heard of a lot of very creative hacks for recruiting great people, but this is definitely a first drinking competition and what I might have to adopt at some point. So that was awesome. I think I think every startup has its every startup that's been through this growth phase has its fair share of stories. I'd love to get a little more of this. Gabriela, if you, what would you say is the most important thing that you've learned in your time at Huckletree, perhaps out of some sort of hardship?
So I think, generally speaking, all learnings come out of hardship. At least all the best ones. I was just having this conversation on Monday when I was driving home from work. I was on the phone with my mum when I was in the car. And I actually, funnily enough, don't often talk about work with my mum, but when I do, it's deep and intense and purposeful. And we were just having this exact conversation, just saying that, you can go through 6 years, as I've been with Huckletree, of building a business in a relatively up market. And yes, you learn things, and you learn things new every day, and you're challenging yourself and you're growing every day as a leader and as an entrepreneur. But actually, it's really when, shit hits the fan, that you learn so much more than you did in all those years combined. And I think, for me, the learnings that I've had from the past 9 months have made me much more resilient as a person and have made me feel much more confident as an entrepreneur. So building disaster plans and worst case strategy planning, which you hope you would never even have to speak to the team because they're so depressing, let alone, put into action. Those are things that we're now used to doing on a daily basis because every new day brings something different today. Previously, pre-COVID, I'm a very sensitive and emotional leader. And I think my team will testify to that, not in a unstructured way, but I bring my whole self to work every day, and I am very invested in the business. And when people would leave the company, it would be, a personal, I would take it personally. I would maybe kind of, have placed too much emphasis on any one person. I now realize that, everybody in the company, including myself, has to be replaceable. When people leave, I now see it as the right moment for them to do so. I want to make sure that we're supporting them to the next level. And so on and so on. I just think that, there have been so many learnings of the past 9 months that have really been for the benefit of the business and of me personally. And hopefully they will serve me in whichever endeavor comes in a life after Huckletree, whenever that might be.
Thank you. Justin, I'm going to push you a little bit harder and ask you, what business mistake would you never want to make again?
I mean, there are loads, but I think there was one, I had this reoccurring, it's not necessarily like a single point in time that I could think about, why did I do what I did? I'm never going to do it again. But I had a very consistent theme of the way that I worked. I want to say certainly the first 4 or 5 years at Deliveroo, which I really tried to tweak and change and improve on the last couple of years. And I think it was this idea that I was very singularly minded when I was doing large transactional work. So a big part of my role today, and as has been throughout my time, is doing big, typically restaurant-led deals. So trying to sign up a big account or extend the relationship or improve something. And I think I was probably, when I was a little younger, I was very obsessed with wanting to be the person that made a deal happen, or the person that you could, oh, Justin did that, or Justin did this. And I think when the business was growing and developing really quickly, things typically landed. We won a lot of deals. We didn't lose a lot of business. We were growing, expanding. It was exciting. It was not as competitive as it is now. And we used to win a lot. And I think I enjoyed taking the credit for that. But it wasn't until, the markets became more competitive. I moved out to Asia, a market that I didn't know as well. And you lose the odd deal. And because you've had this singular mindset that I want to be the person responsible, I want to be the person that wins it. When you lose something, you can also be the person that loses deals and didn't make something happen. And I think I obsessed over wanting to be the person that made it happen, or my team was responsible or whatever. And I think what I've learned more recently is, and it's, last couple of years, is bring others in and make other people accountable and leverage, wider teams more, and, other people's skill sets more. And I think ultimately, if things go bad, there's multiple people accountable, but more to the point, you typically get a better result in the end. And I think it's probably been a big transition for me personally over the last couple of years that, you'll likely be more successful in a team dynamic and a team structure and making things happen together. And if they don't, you kind of lost together and you win together. Sales is very easy to track KPIs and success metrics. You either do something or you don't. And it's nice to do something as a group. And it's also nice that you have the protections when you don't. So I think that was a big pivot for me, and something that
Thanks. Yeah. So thanks for that. So firstly, I appreciate that people in the audience are starting to ask questions in the chat. We're not ignoring you. We plan to have an open Q&A in the last 20 minutes or so. So keep them coming, and we'll definitely kind of use them for the Q&A. Okay, so just kind of before the Q&A, I'd like to move on to thinking about the future a little bit. As every startup has one thing in common: we're trying to build things that are going to matter in a future state of the world. And so, I think it's hard to really justify that kind of career unless you have a view on what's going to happen and how industries or organizations or consumer behavior will evolve over time. So and we've got really such great people here. I'd love to give the audience some insight into the minds of how we kind of collectively see the future. Gilad, could you kind of give us a sense of one or two trends that you think are going to be particularly important over the next 5 or 10 or however many years you like?
I'm very good focusing the future, I have to admit. So I will be very, very careful here. I would say that maybe two thoughts. One is, when the tech started, people thought that the tech will cannibalize the simple jobs, and the more educated jobs are more protected and will not change. Surprisingly, in many cases, it was the opposite. So, for example, people thought brokers for real estate will, die very fast. All kind of line production people will not be needed very, very fast. And apparently, some of the very simple tasks, I'm not even talking about driving a car, which 2 million people in the US, all they do all day is driving a car for money. But even to create a robot that can open any door is quite difficult. Every handle is very different. So to replace a receptionist with a robot, we learned that it's not so easy. And because of that, I would say that the easiest, and usually people tend to say that the jobs that will be replaced first are the most simple jobs. It's not necessarily. It might be a doctor job, in a surgeon job will be affected more than someone with receptionist or as a driver. So this is one thought. The second thought is that there are many things that the COVID accelerated. So e-commerce took it in US 10 years to reach to 15% exposure, or 17%, and now it's 1 year, it doubled to almost 30%. And also working from home or education tech. The question that now we as a venture fund are asking ourselves is, will the COVID effect will stay even if tomorrow a drug will be found? And I hope it will be found. And what from the things from COVID will stay for good? For example, there are many questions about moving back to outside big cities because people work and food can be delivered to them. So people will go to outside Manhattan and outside London, maybe to the outskirts. But this, again, I'm not a good in being in nevuah. So I think it's something to look. Will the COVID effect will stay with us?
Thank you. Very interesting. So, I mean, on a similar theme, for the others, feel free to answer the same question, but I'd like to adjust a little bit, Gabriela. Is there a business that you are aware of, kind of an incumbent business, so one that's been successful in the past, that you think will become obsolete over the next few years?
I'm sure there are. I can't think of any off the top of my head. I think that there are industries, and this is to Gilad's point about technology impacting industries. I think that there are huge industries that are going to need to be continually disrupted. Gilad mentioned the property brokers. My father will kill me for saying this, but I really think that the whole real estate market is absolutely ripe for disruption. As somebody who is looking to buy or rent a house, the process is laborious. I just think it needs to completely change. Today, I was working in our GovTech hub in Westminster, and all of our members in that space are using technology to improve public services for the better of our country. And we've seen firsthand how over the past 9 months, if the government could use technology, more in a more efficient way, how much more beneficial that would be for us as a country. So I think that there are huge industries that will change. But actually, I just really wanted to say something to Gilad's point and to the previous question about important and interesting trends, because I did have a thought about this that I wanted to share. I am not super techie, and I'm much more focused on kind of human behavior, and it's a really an area that I'm really passionate about. And what I feel is that over the next sort of 5-10 years, we will be trending much more towards analog. So over the past sort of 10-20 years, it's been all about the digital and the digital transition. And I think that we're only at the beginning of actually that retrenching back to analog. It's been accelerated by COVID for sure. We're now more interested in the stories behind the businesses, in supporting local, in turning back to the offline, becoming more spiritual. All around the world, we're seeing this will to almost become less connected. And I love that. I think so I grew up in a very religious household and then did my own thing for many years. And recently with my 2 children, I decided to stop using my phone on Shabbat. And it has been revolutionary for me, for my family. And I realized the full circle that I've come, and how I have tried to go more offline and more connect to actually what's there and really live in the moment. And I think that that is a really special thing. So I think that the trend towards analog and being less connected is something that we're probably going to see more of over the next 5-10 years. And I'm really here for it.
Very nice. Justin, so we all kind of, I think some people believe that restaurants that people would be consuming food at home more and more than in restaurants. If you didn't believe that a year ago, you probably do today. I'd love to hear from you a little bit, whether it's in the food industry or not, what company do you think should exist but doesn't today?
I think if I had the answer to that, I'd hopefully be doing it. But I think, I don't know, you touched on people eating at home. And I think that there's going to, I think Gilad said, one day there will be a vaccine and one day people will be back at restaurants and eating less at home, or less of a necessity to eat at home. But I do think, unfortunately, there will be there will be less restaurants and less hospitality businesses than there were before. I just think this, unfortunately, businesses won't be able to survive for as long as they've needed to without a revenue stream, without customers, with regulations, etc. So I think that there's going to be a shortage of places for hospitality people to work. And I also think that there's going to be a surplus of strong hospitality people that aren't in their businesses. So I think there must be a business or an angle of connecting consumers at home with chefs, with interesting hospitality people more and more. I think I've certainly, when you were allowed to, certainly enjoyed having dinners more at home, cooking more at home, meal kits, delivery, friends, whatever. And I think that's probably highlighted and polarized how special the occasion can be. And I think people will most likely innovate in the space of how can I connect a great restaurateur that may or may not be working with a consumer that may or may not have less or more disposable income, but that wants to have a good occasion at home. So I think some connection there will be a thing. I just don't know exactly what it would be.
Good thing you've got a couple of venture capital folk ready to back you and your Deliveroo team when you're ready. Okay, so I think that I'm just conscious of time. I think that brings us really to an end of hearing from the panelists. So kind of before we continue, I just want to thank everyone for sharing their insights and their stories. I certainly enjoyed it. I'm sure everyone else did as well. There's some really great questions coming through. I think we're pretty agnostic as to whether the questions come in the form of chat or verbal. So I'll kind of start with the ones that have been posted, and if we have time, we'll open it up to verbal. If anyone wants to unmute and say something, just feel free within reason. So the first question sounds like it's for Justin. So someone in the audience has a startup that is similar to must be Deliveroo. So the question is around what are the major challenges that you faced during launch and how you focused on priority issues? Any lessons learned that we can take away? Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think I'll try to answer the question as best as I can. I think the first point is what are the major challenges that you faced during the launch? I think it was probably three things. A need for people and good people, a need for speed, and a need for technology. Like the business had to work. So I think the first thing, so those are the big challenges. How can you grow as quickly as you can grow? We very much believed at the time it was a land grab to open, to acquire customers, to sign up restaurants, to get riders, to grow the market share. So we wanted to move really quickly. So when we first started launching, to be really specific, when we started launching pockets of London, which is how Deliveroo works, we work in a very zonal system. So you have an area, South Kensington, Chelsea, Knightsbridge, or Mayfair, Marylebone, Soho. So we used to launch areas one by one by one by one by one, and I think we would do it in an 8-week timeline. We then realized that because of the selling cycle, you could really only speak to a certain amount of restaurants over and over again. So we realized that if you could open contiguous, so zones that bordered each other at the same time, you could basically have your ability to launch areas. And you could also launch areas in 4 to 6 weeks. So we basically just realizing that, okay, there's only a certain amount of people you can speak to in an area. At the time, we were only launching with really premium restaurants, so it was a finite list. We just realized that you could actually basically double your speed if you opened areas at the exact same time, which I think to the conversation earlier kind of sounds counterintuitive. Why don't you just focus on one area quickly and just get that done? But actually, the way that a selling cycle works is you can't actually speak to the same person over and over and over again. They have to get back to you. They have to engage. So I think that was like a big learning. You can just, if you slightly change your model and you actually do, it's like wasn't more is less, but you could just do more and with effectively the same workload. The other one was that you can just make people go quicker. If you push them harder, I think that was a big learning. So if you tell someone it'll take 8 weeks and then you tell them it'll be 6, it somehow gets done in 6. That was a big thing, which was definitely a cultural thing from myself and Will. And I think the last one was tech, like challenges. Like we're a technology business. We have, there's 3 constituents in every order. There's rider, there's customer, and there's restaurant. Things break. And just as you scale a business and you're installing hardware and you're dealing with software, things just fell away. We had a tech team that was based in the US and at the time. And I think you know, those were the big challenges. I guess just to quickly answer, how did you deal with those? So that's how we dealt with those challenges and the lessons. Those are lessons learned. I think like think outside the box. Like it's not always super simplistic. I'm just going to do one by one by one. Think larger, push people harder, and bring in good people.
Thanks. So we've got another question. I'd actually, it's not targeted to anyone, but I think I'm going to pick Gilad to take a first stab at this. The question is, in your panel's opinion, do entrepreneurs require specific domain knowledge to solve a pain point and launch a successful business? Great question.
I mean, if you know the subject, it's maybe I will reframe myself. Most startups in the world, sadly, they're not reinventing something. They are doing something and improving something that was exist before. This is one type of startups. I would say in that category, you have 95% of the startups. There's 5%, actually even much less, that are doing something that no one did before. I think each one requires different talents and different way of thinking. For the first one, you truly need to know the landscape, the industry, everything, because you are aiming to do something better than everybody that are currently in the market doing it. The second one, it's a very innovative mind, just a very, very innovative mind, or just a moment of eureka that, you know, you saw something, you say, I wish that was exist, and then you solve it.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Gabriela, I would, you know, I'm sure the audience would like to hear from you on this as well.
I mean, I'm gonna say no, just because I didn't have, and it would be to my own detriment if I said yes. But I think that I think that, look, does it help if you can be the expert of your product or your industry or the world or, you know, whatever it is that you're trying to build? Yes, of course. And specifically with female founders, I think that that is something that we could be using to our advantage much more than we do. But I also think that, you know, there are millions of founders out there who just have the skills required to launch a business and take that business through the various stages, through hard times, through good times, and be there to see the end of it. And they may have zero experience in their domain from before. So I don't think that it's a necessary, no. But I'm not the investor. I'm also laughing to myself because I've just realized that if I swipe right on my phone, I can actually see people. I've been speaking to myself for the last hour. So I feel like a bit of an idiot.
Nice. Okay. So yeah, so I mean, thanks for those. Rabbi, I think you mentioned that you had a question.
Okay, if I can come in just to from a different vantage point. So look, for all of you, there are moments certainly where we are confronted with doubt about our project and about our time frame or people, etc., about the project in general. Sometimes it could be more serious or less serious. The question is, when those things happen, when that doubt occurs and it throws you off, has it happened to you? And if it does, how do you overcome self-doubt and focus and reinvigorate your dream, your passion? Gabriela, you're the real entrepreneur.
I was hoping I wasn't going to be picked. Yes, it happens the whole time. So a good case example is like back to the culture at Huckletree that I've been trying to build. We've always had really high ratings from our team members with regard to how highly they'd rate us, or how much out of 10 they'd rate us as an employer. And that rating dropped. We did a pulse survey at the end of October, and the rating has dropped. And it definitely was a blow to everything that I had thought that I had been building in the right way over the past few years. And you just have to contextualize, and I think that's a really big part of being a job as a founder, as an entrepreneur, is context. Looking at what's happening in the world, understanding why situations are how they are, and going back to having, I think if you feel strongly that what you're building is positive, has a positive impact in the world, you're doing right by the people that work for you. I think in those moments of doubts, you fall back on that and you look at the bigger picture. And it's definitely something that I've been, battling with and dealing with over the past few weeks. But, yeah, of course, you fault yourself and you take things to heart. And I think learning how to not take things to heart is a big part of the process.
Justin, what about you? Especially something that's so large and big, it's as you grow, you're more exposed, you're more, you're reaching higher and higher, and therefore, in a way, the risks are greater. And then, if at those moments, something happens from left field, like they say, not the known unknowns, but the unknown unknowns comes your way. How do you sort of gather yourself and strengthen your resolve and your confidence?
I think the fear of failure is very real for me. I think doesn't inspire me, but it is something I definitely worry about, and I don't want to let myself down, the company down, whatever. So that definitely motivates me to not, and to, I think, always pushes me to try to be better or recover from a mistake. I also try and work under a mindset that when things are really good, they're probably not as good as they are. And when things are bad, they're probably not as bad as they are either. And that the world is cyclical, and it's the way that it distributes successes, failures, opportunities. So I try to just, I think, take a step back. I think it's probably easier now than when I was like younger and just getting started and more emotional, having seen less. I think it was probably more real. I think the last one, I think Gabriela was touching on it, was surround yourself with a good team that can push you and keep you motivated, and you have their back when they would let you down, and vice versa, not let you down when they fail, or and vice versa. And yeah, culture and like good strong ethos and respect for one another and trust. I think all that stuff is kind of combined to creates a dynamic then that kind of just keeps pushing and pushing and pushing you.
Sorry, I was on mute. I'm off mute now. So a really great question has just come on the chat. Thanks, Sophia. I'm gonna let the panel volunteer for answering this question, and if no one does, I'll pick someone. Women are disproportionately impacted by COVID professionally. How are your companies tackling diversity in recruitment, especially unconscious bias? Is this getting better?
Just unmute myself. I think being the only woman on the panel, I'm probably the most qualified to at least kick off this conversation. So 100% women, and this is something that I feel really, really strongly about, women are at a disadvantage. Why? Because when everything is happening at home, childcare, schools, etc., women are going to be the first ones that are going to be pulled back to the house to look after the children. So it's something that I think every company needs to be conscious of and needs to be conscious that when it is about hiring, but it's also about how you are bringing your team members back to the office. And something that I feel very strongly about is that if you leave that choice to the hands of your team, yes, it may be democratic, but it equally may mean that when we go back to work and we're all in the office, the people that are there are largely male, they're largely extroverted. And not only does it leave certain people behind, but I think it will also create a very bad dynamic and culture in the workspace. And the people who are not there will have less access to relationship building and to progression and development opportunities, etc. So I just think it's something that every business needs to be conscious of. And one thing that we have tried to do always, and not just over the past 9 months at Huckletree, is really support women, but all minorities in the workspace, and with regards to their hiring. So when we're hiring, I'm involved in 100% of the recruitment processes that we do at Huckletree ourselves, and we have hired to date over 150 people that have, been through Huckletree's doors and been employed by us. They're not all with us today, but over the course. And one thing that I do and that I'm very adamant about is that if I get to the final round of an interview process and I'm not seeing a diverse candidate in that final round, and by that I mean a candidate from a minority background, a parent, somebody who doesn't fall into the natural age group of the rest of our workforce, a candidate with a disability, etc. For me, that round has not been completed, and I won't give that role to someone. And that's just one solution. There are many. It's definitely not the be all and end all, but I think it is really important in today's world. You can probably hear in my voice how passionately I feel about this, that we need to be focusing on increasing representation. And once you have good representation, making sure that you are inclusive and that those people from those minorities feel as much part of your business as anybody else.
Thanks for that. It's amazing what Huckletree is doing, and I know there's efforts across the board in the UK tech ecosystem. I know we're approaching the end. Do any of the other panelists want to address that question?
I didn't hear the full question.
So it's about diversity and inclusion, and do we think it's getting better, especially in a world where COVID is affecting women and minorities more?
Maybe I will just, from my side, one, you see that the big company, the tech industry is very influenced by the big five in the US. So Amazon, Apple, Google. And you see that at least some of them are putting it on the radar, and they are doing many steps towards putting it on the agenda. And because of that, I think the world is becoming better, and people see the value of that. The second thing, at least in one of our companies that it's outside our portfolio, but we worked very hard with, we compensate the management according to diversity on vesting of their options. So one of the key elements in the KPI was creation of diversity in the company, because the company was very far from being diverse. And it worked. Like, the management did it, and rather than tell them you have to do it, we told them if you won't do it, you don't do it, but your option will vest slower, and it worked very well.
The only thing I was going to say was I don't think I'm as close to it as Gabby, for example, but I think every company that I'm seeing, you're certainly seeing companies trying. I don't know if you're where we need to be, if we're anywhere near we need to be, but at Deliveroo we released yesterday, gender pay gap for the first time, I think. So I think the companies, we're changing the way that we're doing recruiting. So do I think Deliveroo is there? Do I think the world is there? No, but I certainly get the feeling that it is evolving and it is changing and it is getting better. But again, I don't think it's there. But I see from a personal experience, certainly my company trying to make it better. So.
Okay. So Rabbi, you're on mute. But I think Yeah, so I think that brings us to an end. I'm going to pass on to Rabbi Vogel to finish off.
Yeah, so just wanted to thank everyone for joining us tonight, especially the panelists and Justin from London, Gilad, who is, I'm not sure I can say where he is, but he's not in London, maybe South America, Gabriela, who's in London, I'm sure, and thank you very much for sharing in a very transparent way, honest way, passionate way, lots of insights, lots of ideas, which can certainly lend themselves to thinking a little differently. Lots of wisdom shared, so we are very grateful to you, and also especially to Gideon, all the way from South Africa. Gideon, can I share that? Very beautiful part of South Africa. I'll leave it up to you to guess. Thank you very much for moderating that. It was very inspiring, very illuminating, and very helpful, I'm sure, to most of us. I just wanted to conclude. I tried to with one or two very short anecdotes. So I have one over here from the Talmud, which is especially relevant to entrepreneurship, and it goes like this. I learned this at a very young age, and I always remember this, and that is, if a person comes to you and says, I've worked hard and I have not been successful, don't believe them. If they've said, I haven't exerted myself and I've been successful, then don't believe them. But if they say to you, I've worked hard and I've been successful, then believe them. So that is something that I wanted to share with you, and it's certainly very relevant to this arena. And also, we spoke about negativity before. The grandson of the Baal Shem Tov once said something very simple, but I think extremely insightful, and said that the secret weapon of our negative impulse is to exaggerate a problem. And, you know, especially in the times in which we find ourselves, that's incredibly important, because as you were saying, some of the panelists, with regard to context, not to exaggerate is extremely important. And certainly we tend to exaggerate problems. Things are not as bad as some people might want to make them out to. So I was talking to someone the other day. He said, you know, look at the glass half full. Yes, you need a plan, but you know, the glass is half full. And please God, we will get out of this stronger and better in many ways, as Gabriela, you were alluding to before. Certainly we will become stronger as individuals and collectively as communities. I just wanted to conclude by saying that we have lots of stuff going on. Just check your emails and social media, but in particular, we are very honored to have December 2nd, Dr. Edith Eiger, who is a Holocaust survivor and the author of the international bestseller, the book called The Choice, which was highly recommended by Bill Gates and Oprah Winfrey. That is December 2nd, so please sign up. We've got over 100 people already. It's very worthwhile. Also, we are in the middle of planning a launch for our mentorship. We call it Mentorship 360 program, where we'll offer mentorship, business mentorship, life guidance, and on multi-levels, so between reverse mentorship, mentees, mentors, peer-to-peer, etc. We hope to launch that January 2021. Anyone who's interested, both in the mentor side, mentee side, we would be glad to hear from you. We'll send a follow-up email with a recording of the highlights of this session, including you know, wanting to hear more from you with regard to the mentorship. Anyway, again, thank you very much to our panelists. Thank you very much to our moderator. Thank you very much, most importantly, to all of you. We wish you well. Think good, and it will be good. Take care. Maybe share any good news, and stay safe and stay healthy. Have a wonderful evening.